This is Stories of Impact, the art and science of human flourishing. In every episode, we travel the world to explore intersections of science and spirituality. I'm your host, writer Tavia Gilbert, and along with journalist Richard Sergey, every first and third Tuesday, we look through a new lens at old traditions, hear from new generations as they dream up innovative solutions, and learn new ways to make sense of modern life. Across the world, human beings are faced with huge decisions. How hot will we let the planet get? How do we stop conflicts making life for so many so painful? We are not powerless. These are decisions that humans are capable of making, though no one person can solve such existential questions on their own. To take care of each other and create a better future, we have to decide to work with each other to do it.
Evolutionarily, we are dependent on each other. We cannot survive on our own. Collective decisions and collaborative problem solving, those are very important skills because we're interdependent. We have to make collective decisions that would impact all of our lives. When the goal or when the outcome benefits both of us, I'm more motivated to pay attention to my partner's view. It also pushes me to sort of reflect on my reasoning. So it's really, really important in life. And we're stronger together. And that leads to making some collective decisions. So we need to prioritize what would benefit all of us. So that's the key aspect of collaborative problem solving, because when we get it right, we win together. It doesn't matter who was right.
Dr. Bahar Köymen is a senior lecturer of psychology, communication, and human neuroscience at the University of Manchester, and she's studying the emergence and development of human reasoning.
All these skills that we have, why do we have them? What is the evolutionary function? Imagine a long time ago, we're hunting together. If I hunt on my own, the food I will get will be very small. But if we hunt together, we'll probably get much larger food. It's going to increase or improve our individual payoff. When we're hunting together, I'm saying we need to go left and you're saying we need to go right. We need to decide which way we need to go, but we need to stick together. Otherwise, we're going to go home hungry. And if I say, as long as I'm not hungry, I don't care if we go left or right. I want to make the right decision. In history, those people who were concerned about being right or they didn't survive. So those who stick together and collectively made better decisions were the groups that were more likely to survive.
What's the core question of Dr. Köymen's research?
Do collectives make better decisions than individuals? This is a big question because on the one hand, yes, especially when I'm reasoning with someone who disagrees with me, that person helps me realize what kinds of biases I have. I must have made a mistake. I might not have been careful, etc. So we cancel out each other's errors and biases. But on the other hand, imagine you're reasoning with someone who agrees with you. We are less likely to catch these kinds of errors and biases. And as collectives, we do make some terrible decisions.
As a developmental psychologist, to better understand how humans develop collective reasoning, Dr. Köymen is taking an unusual approach by studying children.
Generally, when you say human population, everybody lumps children and adults into the same group. Looking at younger ages is always more interesting to me, and I argue that young children are a different population. They're not just human population, but they're a special human population that we need to pay attention to. Children are not just little adults. They have their own logic, they have their own reasoning, they have their own biases, if you will. They tend to make some mistakes, but they're clever mistakes. When you do experiments with adults usually tend to predict what you're trying to do. And we have this social desirability effect, meaning that they don't necessarily give their honest responses, but they try to look nice, or they know that if they say their honest opinion, they might be sort of judged. Whereas young children don't have that kind of filter. So they are a bit more primitive in some ways. So it allows us to see the true nature.
Including children in her research is not just to satisfy her curiosity. It serves a higher purpose.
I'm just curious about what children do at what age to begin with, how those things change with age. And then the bigger picture of how is that going to serve like humanity and all. I guess the biggest question is what makes us uniquely human, and whatever that is, how does that emerge within a life of an individual, and how does that progress? That's the question I'm investigating. Will children benefit from this kind of process? And whether that process makes them better reasoners later on.
Dr. Köymen believes the answer is probably yes.
Young children rely on others to learn about the world. Even if the collectives don't make the correct decisions per se, just the process itself, just to exchange ideas, justify our beliefs by reasons, they can benefit from this collective reasoning.
So Dr. Köymen's research partners are 3-year-olds, 4-year-olds, 5, 6, 7-year-olds. What is it about 3-year-olds that gives Dr. Köymen a good entry point for studying collective decision-making?
According to some theories, age 3 is a turning point in children's social and cognitive development, meaning that children start understanding that I have a perspective and another person may have a different perspective. So at age 3, children start appreciating that people might have different perspectives, but they tend to sort of understand all perspectives in relation to another. Your perspective in relation to mine. Let's say we're trying to make a collective decision and we have different ideas. I propose solution X and you propose solution Y. For us to reach a correct joint decision, I need to explain to you my reasoning. Why do I believe X? And you explain to me why you believe in Y, and then we compare our reasons, and then we go with the solution supported by a better set of reasons. Age 3 is a critical point in which children start engaging in this kind of collective reasoning and are able to make these rational collective decisions.
Dr. Köymen designed a research study to investigate kids' collective decision-making, including exploring whether children can understand that others may have false beliefs. She explains.
We set children up in different scenarios. For instance, we assign children a partner. Oftentimes, we set them up in a collaborative decision-making process, meaning that it doesn't matter who is right, as long as the two of them agree on the correct choice, they will both get a reward. And then the partner, for instance, who is an experimenter, sometimes a same age peer, we set it up in such a way that from the perspective of the participant child, the partner makes a mistake or partner is unaware of certain facts that would allow them to reach the correct decision. And then we observe how children track the perspective or knowledge state or the beliefs of their partner and intervene if necessary.
How does Dr. Bahar create these conditions for 3-year-old research partners?
Let's say we need to decide where a toy is hidden and there are 2 boxes. My partner and I, we have good reason to believe that the toy is in the white box. And my partner leaves the room, and then whilst my partner is out of the room, someone moves the toy from the white box to the black box. So when my partner comes back, he or she falsely believes that the toy is in the white box. And he or she is about to make a mistake and choose the white box on our behalf, and we will lose the game. So what I would say, no, don't do that. I saw it moving to the other box. So my job is to tell my partner that situation has changed. I need to correct the false belief of my partner. And then obviously we have some true belief conditions in which the partner leaves the room, toy moves around but goes back to the original location. So when my partner comes back, my partner doesn't have a false belief anymore, and I don't need to say anything. My partner can choose the white box on our behalf.
The scenarios Dr. Köymen describes are called change of location tasks, which are frequently used in studies of children. But in typical studies, children are limited to observing and answering questions, and Dr. Köymen prefers a more interactive approach.
Instead of interviewing children and making it an interview study, we created this collaborative paradigm and placed the children in the scenario. So they're involved in the process. Arguably, that would motivate them to track the knowledge state of their partners a little bit better. Compared to these well-established individual tasks, when we make it a collaborative task, children tend to perform a little bit better than individual tasks. That goes back to this comparison of do children actually benefit from this collective reasoning or not? And these kinds of studies show us that when children are placed in collaborative settings, they tend to display more advanced skills when they were observed in similar situations individually.
The design of such scenarios changes depending on the age of the participant.
Older kids don't have problem understanding that people might have false beliefs. But with older kids, we sometimes set them up. We take 2 5-year-olds, for instance, and we give them conflicting information. I talk to child A and tell them that the correct solution is X. And I tell B separately that the correct solution is Y. Depending on the condition they're in, child A receives a more reliable piece of information. For instance, I tell child A that, well, I saw this happening. Whereas I tell child B that, well, I'm not sure, I heard this happening. So when child A and B are placed together, they are set up to disagree with each other. One of them will suggest solution X, the other one will suggest solution Y, and they have to work out which solution is the correct one. And they need to talk about where they get this information from. Normal standard of reasoning, witnessing something tops hearsay. Direct evidence is better than indirect evidence. Direct observation is better than indirect observation. So then they would go with the suggestion of child A, whose information comes from a more reliable source.
Dr. Köymen's study also investigates how bias shows up in collective reasoning.
For instance, if you're buying a computer, one of them is a really old computer, which is a negative side, but it's very, very cheap, which is positive. On the other hand, you can buy a brand new computer, which is a positive, but it's very, very expensive, which is negative. If you ask 100 people, which option do you prefer, depending on how much money they have and what their priority is, 50% would choose the old and cheap computer, other 50% roughly would choose the better but more expensive computer. But imagine I introduce a third option, and third option is like a really old computer, but it's almost as expensive as the new computer. So it's clearly the worst option. But when you introduce that option, it automatically makes that old but cheap computer look better than the new and expensive computer. We can manipulate people's preferences by introducing various options, and those options, if they're inferior to one of the options, that option starts all of a sudden looking a little bit more attractive.
Dr. Köymen calls that manipulative third option a decoy, and decoys influence kids' decisions as much as they do adults.
Children around age 5 have this kind of bias. As soon as that third option is introduced, they are just basically tempted to choose one option which they would probably normally not choose. Are children less likely to fall for this trick, if you will, when they are reasoning together with a partner? This is something we're currently investigating. So individually, I might fall for this and start preferring that option just because its decoy is present. But let's say I'm reasoning with you, you might sort of save me from falling for this trick.
Dr. Köymen's young study participants might be paired with an adult or with another child. She's found that how old the partner is offers interesting insights into how we can all get better at collective problem solving.
When we're reasoning about who did the right thing, we need to make a collective moral judgment. Children are much better, they're more likely to make better decisions when they're reasoning with a peer than a parent. Meaning that when they're reasoning with someone more advanced than them, they sit back and wait for the adult to make the decision for them and guide them. They don't say much. And they just defer to that adult just because of their respect for authority, their respect for their knowledge and expertise, etc. Because they think they know better. But when they're reasoning with a peer, they think, okay, this person is just as good as me or just as stupid as me. Again, it comes to this equal respect. So my perspective is as important as my partner's perspective. They are basically making decisions by actively engaging in the decision-making process. So they were more involved, they reason more.
And what does Dr. Köymen say this reveals?
It highlights the importance of talking to someone that is equal. It teaches us to, A, resolve disagreements in the most basic sense, because when we are reasoning with someone and the outcome is relevant to both of us, so if we lose together, and if we win together. There's something in it for us. In this collaborative context, the crucial thing is equal respect. So if you and I are trying to decide on something and you're saying, no, you're wrong, I cannot just dismiss your perspective. Your perspective is just as important as mine. So I need to convince you to agree with me, and vice versa. You need to convince me to agree with you. But in this kind of context, each perspective is equally valuable and none is superior than the other. We need to have equal respect. And if we have equally valid perspectives, we need to agree or work out whose suggestion or whose proposal or whose claim is better than the other. We need to explain our reasoning to each other and then work out whose reasoning is superior than the other. And that relies on the exchange of reasons.
Dr. Köymen's research suggests that there's not just benefit in reasoning with your peers, but in reasoning with someone who, in some ways, is your superior.
Children tend to benefit more from reasoning with a peer than a parent. But does that mean that they never benefit from their interactions with their parents? Of course not. So we want to spell out, okay, if it's the peers that they need to reason with, what context is helpful? And when is it helpful to reason with someone who's more advanced than you? Is it the moral dilemmas or moral judgments that children are better at when they're reasoning with peers and not parents? Maybe for more scientific reasoning or more difficult or more abstract problems, maybe they would benefit from reasoning with their parents more than their peers because their peers would not be helpful. Sometimes you need someone who is more advanced than you to improve. So we want to spell out which partner, what context of collaborative problem solving, and what age do these things go together. So we want to be a little bit more specific about contexts of collaboration.
Dr. Köymen is not suggesting that the goal is to avoid disagreement. In fact, disagreement is an essential part of collaborative problem solving. It's how we grow.
If you keep reasoning with someone who agrees with you, or if you keep reasoning with these yes-mans, you find yourself in echo chambers and you get polarized and you're more radical. You cannot really progress. You're stuck where you are. If you're reasoning with someone who agrees with you, the conversations tend to be shorter. And if I have any biases or if I made any errors, it doesn't help me discover those. Whereas I'm disagreeing with someone, particularly disagreeing with someone who I can trust. That's the critical part. So if someone I trust disagrees with me, that's very important. I value that person's perspective because I know that person is after the same thing as I am. That allows me to, okay, if he disagrees with me or she disagrees with me, they must have a point. I need to listen to them. I may agree with them, I may disagree with them. That's another thing. I might be convinced by their argument or not, but I would at least listen and give it a shot, especially if it comes from someone you trust. We would highlight that how it is important to disagree with people we trust, and we might suggest people to engage in this kind of collaborative problem solving and appreciate the disagreement and different perspectives in certain contexts.
Sometimes disagreements lead to conflicts, though, which can cause harm. When Dr. Köymen and her colleagues studied how kids responded to an apology from someone for a harm that person had caused,
we found that by age 5, children are quite sensitive to the sincerity of the apology or what kind of reasons accompany these apologies. So they're a bit selective in their forgiveness. It's not just saying sorry, it's not a free pass. You need to say more. You need to tell me why you did this, how this happened. Then I can just conclude that, okay, this was an accident. He didn't mean to hurt.
Kid selectivity might teach better conflict resolution to adults.
If I, for instance, harm you in any way, I need to explain myself to you. I owe you an explanation. I owe you a reason. And that's gonna restore our relationship because you would forgive me. And if I give good reasons for my transgression or my bad behavior, you understand that was not intended. I didn't mean to harm you. It was an accident of some sort. That shows my understanding of the norms of my social group. That shows my willingness to repair my relationship to you. And also allows me to maintain my reputation so that I don't look like a person who would just hurt other people. And we highlight that reason giving is quite crucial in the context of transgressions in the moral domain.
In an era of transgressions in the moral domain, Dr. Köymen's research into collective reasoning and what she's uniquely learned from children may show us a way forward. How to apologize, repair relationship, connect in community, and make better decisions together. It gives her hope.
What excites me the most is how children actually benefit from this social interaction, which is the hope. When I'm interacting with my daughter, I'm thinking that, okay, this kind of interaction would help her improve some skills and all that. So I'm really excited when I see children actually benefiting from this kind of collaborative problem solving, and it makes me more optimistic about the future.
We hope you'll come back in 2 weeks for another new episode. In the meantime, please share the Stories of Impact podcast with someone you think would love it. And we'd love to hear from you. You can get in touch at storiesofimpact.org. This has been the Stories of Impact podcast with an interview by Richard Sergey. Written and produced by Tavia Gilbert for Talkbox Productions. Music by Alexander Filipiak. Mix and master by Kayla Elrod. Executive producer Michelle Cobb. The Stories of Impact podcast is generously supported by Templeton World Charity Foundation.